Number 9. Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares. 19-year-old college student Faith Hedgepeth was found dead nearly a decade ago in an off-campus apartment near the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She had been raped and died from a severe beating to the head, according to an autopsy. Sadly, the case went cold, leaving the young woman's friends and family members without closure for 9 long, agonizing years. Finally, last September, the Chapel Hill Police Department announced that they had arrested someone in Faith's murder. Using DNA obtained from a rape kit, investigators connected 28-year-old Miguel Enrique Salguero Olivares to the horrific crime. The suspect also reportedly resembles a DNA profile sketch that police released in 2016. It's unclear how he became a suspect in the first place. Police carried out several search warrants on the man's apartment and collected blood, hair, and saliva samples from him. They charged Salguero Olivares with first-degree murder the following day. North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein said in a statement that the arrest underscores the importance of DNA in solving crimes. He went on to say that, no matter how long ago you committed your crime, we will never stop coming for you. Number 8. The Golden State Killer. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, a serial rapist, killer, and burglarizer terrorized women across California. He murdered at least 13 victims and committed at least 50 rapes and 120 burglaries between 1974 and 1986. The suspect went on at least 3 different crime sprees, earning himself 3 different nicknames before it became apparent to law enforcement that the crimes were all being committed by one person, known as the Golden State Killer. Both police and victims received taunting phone calls that are believed to have come from the deranged criminal. The Golden State Killer's identity remained a mystery for decades. Numerous suspects were eliminated through alibis and DNA evidence. In 2016, the FBI and local law enforcement agencies announced that they were embarking on a renewed effort to identify the killer. A $50,000 reward was offered for information leading to the suspect's capture. It wasn't until 2018 that investigators finally identified a former police officer named Joseph James D'Angelo as the Golden State Killer. They found him through forensic genetic genealogy, which enabled them to identify him through his family members' DNA. The process was complicated and time-consuming, and involved ruling out other suspects based on things like age, sex, and place of residence. But after eliminating other potential matches, one by one, detectives were left with just one possible culprit. To make sure they had the right suspect, they tested the Golden State Killer's DNA with samples that were stealthily taken from D'Angelo's car door handle and his curbside garbage can. It was too late to charge D'Angelo with rapes or burglaries, based on the state's statute of limitations. Instead, police charged him with 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping, realizing that they had a huge case on their hands that could cost taxpayers upwards of $20 million. Prosecutors accepted D'Angelo's offer to plead guilty in order to avoid the death penalty. He pleaded guilty to 13 murders in 2020 and will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. A sentence that many would argue is long overdue after he got away with his crime for so long. He probably thought he would never get caught. Number 7. Francesco Pelle. The ongoing global COVID-19 pandemic has thrown a wrench into many people's life plans, to say the very least. Criminals are no exception. And while the virus has mostly complicated things in almost every imaginable aspect, in some cases it has actually made things easier. Take, for example, Italian mobster Francesco Pelle. In 2019, he was convicted of ordering the 2006 murder of another mobster's wife as a revenge killing during a feud between mob families. 4 others, including a child, were injured, but survived the attack, which happened just days after Pelle was shot in the back by the rival gang. Pelle challenged the conviction, which was upheld by Italy's Supreme Court, and vanished right before his sentencing date. His disappearance came as startling news to Italian Interior Minister Luciano Lamorgese, who described the fugitive as one of the country's most dangerous criminals. Anti-mafia prosecutors and paramilitary police searched diligently for Pelle, but it wasn't until early last year that the authorities finally caught up with him at a clinic in Portugal, where he was being treated for COVID-19. His capture brought the years-long pursuit to a surprisingly quiet end, and he will now face justice for crimes that he probably thought were part of his past. Number 6. Darren P. Devine. Last September, 30-year-old Darren P. Devine escaped from a hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, after being ordered there by a judge. At the time, he faced multiple charges, including assault with intent to rape, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, domestic assault and battery, strangulation, breaking and entering, vandalism, possession of narcotics, escaping from a penal institution, and more. Devine also had 91 prior convictions. The suspect managed to scale a tall fence and then fled the hospital on foot. Investigators reportedly knew that catching him might be a challenge, given his history of violence and the ability to survive in the wilderness. The U.S. Marshal Service got involved in the search and worked with numerous local and state agencies in an effort to capture Devine, who they considered to be an imminent threat to the public. They finally found him after receiving a tip that he might be traveling through rural Georgia with his brother, Jordan Devine. First, the authorities went after Jordan. Once they had him in custody, they tracked Darren's whereabouts to a swamp where he was camping out and set up a perimeter overnight to ensure that he wouldn't somehow slip out of sight. They captured him the next morning along a roadside. Devine was extradited to Massachusetts, where he'll answer for the latest slew of allegations in what appears to be a years-long criminal lifestyle. Number 5. James Clanton. A few years ago, a Georgia woman named Jessie Still bought a DNA kit from 23andMe to learn more about her ancestry. As a self-proclaimed true crime enthusiast, she had become interested in learning about her genetic history after reading about how the Golden State Killer was captured through a technique called forensic genetic genealogy, FGG. Still uploaded her results to GED Match, a website that helps consumers find their long-lost relatives through DNA. She had no idea that in doing so, she would become entangled in a 40-year-old cold case and the debate about DNA-related privacy concerns and how law enforcement uses the information to catch criminals. Using FGG, the method that had fascinated Still enough to do a personal DNA test in the first place, police identified her as a familial match to James Clanton, a suspect in the 1980 murder of a 21-year-old Colorado woman named Helen Kruzinski. The college student was abducted near a bus stop in Englewood and was later found raped, bound, and stabbed to death in an empty field. And Miss Still just happened to be a distant cousin of the suspect. She told news station 11 Alive that she didn't think it was a big deal to upload her DNA results to GED Match until months later when she received an email from across the country. The Douglas County Sheriff's Department told her in the message that she was identified as the suspect's closest DNA relative, and it was her genetic information specifically that had led them to James Clanton in the first place. He was apprehended in Florida and received a life sentence after pleading guilty to first-degree murder. Of course, the news was shocking to Still, who said that the ordeal made her realize that everything is connected and it's a small world. Cases like this are increasingly calling into question whether there should be any limits on law enforcement's ability to conduct investigations using publicly available DNA information. The debate is ongoing, with one side arguing that forensic detective work is an invasion of privacy, while others claim that it's a groundbreaking tool that is finally helping police bring even the most clever criminals to justice. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. But first, be sure to subscribe. Number 4. Marco Di Lauro. Dubbed a super fugitive and Italy's second most dangerous criminal, Marco Di Lauro was a mafia boss who spent 14 years on the run. Authorities failed to find him despite an international arrest warrant being issued in 2006, along with an Interpol bulletin showing his picture and information. So it probably came as a huge surprise when detectives learned in 2019 that Di Lauro might still be in Italy. They figured this out after suspicious activity in Naples tipped them off to the man's possible presence. Their search led them to an inconspicuous flat, where 150 officers conducted a raid. Based on the massive number of police involved, it's probably safe to say that they didn't expect things to go down peacefully. They walked in on Di Lauro sitting with his 2 cats and eating pasta, and arrested him without incident. Officers found no weapons and a small amount of money. being a career criminal runs in DeLaro's blood. He's the fourth son of Paolo DeLaro, a former boss of the Neapolitan mafia clan who's been in prison since 2005. Given his connections, it's not exactly shocking that he wound up on a wayward path, or that he had the resources and support to remain conveniently hidden for such a long time. Number 3. Octaviano Juarez Coro. Back in 2006, a lone gunman opened fire at a Memorial Day picnic at Milwaukee's South Shore Park along Lake Michigan, killing 2 victims and wounding 3 others among the hundreds that were there at the time. Law enforcement suspected that the shooting was committed by Octaviano Juarez Coro, whose estranged wife was among the wounded. Milwaukee County issued warrants for his arrest for 2 counts of second-degree homicide and 3 counts of first-degree attempted homicide, but he fled town before police could get him into custody. Eager to bring the suspect to justice, the FBI obtained a federal warrant charging him with unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, put him on their 10 most wanted list, and offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. Juarez Coro managed to evade law enforcement for nearly 16 years until a tip came in about him possibly being located in the city of Zapopan in Guadalajara, Mexico. The FBI and Mexican authorities worked together to pinpoint the fugitive's exact whereabouts, and they recently finally captured him. In a press release, Special Agent in Charge Michael Hensley mentioned that Juarez Coro hid in another country, believing time and distance was on his side. Hensley commended the efforts of the numerous law enforcement agencies that helped the FBI finally catch the fugitive, who now has no choice but to answer in court for his alleged actions. It's unclear whether Juarez Coro has been extradited yet, and if he has hired an attorney to represent him in the case. Number 2. Jesse Spitzer. 30-year-old Jesse Spitzer recently found himself under the scrutiny of numerous law enforcement agencies as he embarked on an alleged interstate crime spree throughout the northwestern United States. His campaign of recklessness began in Washington and northern Idaho, where he was suspected of committing numerous burglaries and vehicle thefts. As detectives turned up the heat on Spitzer, he went on the run. Police and canines chased him into the forest near Gold Bar, Washington, but he managed to evade their clutches and fled the area. He reappeared in a neighboring county after a local resident found that someone had stolen a gun from their car, and another witness saw him creeping suspiciously near a home. Police closed in on Spitzer, who allegedly threatened to commit suicide if they didn't leave. He then ran on foot and managed to once again escape before officers could take him into custody. Spitzer continued fleeing, taking the chase across state lines as he carjacked people at gunpoint and shot at officers to try getting them off his trail. He was finally caught hiding out in a camper in Hagen, Montana. It appears as though shooting at cops is nothing new for Spitzer, whose criminal history dates back to 2011. At just 19 years old, he was sentenced to up to 22 years in prison for reportedly shooting at a sheriff's sergeant while fleeing from law enforcement in Nevada. Number 1. Lorenzo Novoa Williams. Between June and October 1999, 3 women in southeast Cobb County, Georgia, awoke to a man standing over them in their homes. The man proceeded to brutally assault the victims, who all lived within 3 miles of each other. DNA evidence confirmed that the same home intruder was responsible for all 3 rapes, but at the time, police were unable to match the DNA to any known offenders through the CODIS criminal database. The case went cold and fell off the investigative radar until it was reopened in 2018 with funding from the Georgia Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. Using forensic genealogy, detectives connected the crimes to a suspect named Lorenzo Novoa Williams. They obtained a warrant to travel to Arkansas and collected a DNA sample from him. It was a match. Williams denied responsibility for the rapes. He vanished and was found dead days later from an apparent suicide. Even though it's unfortunately too late to bring him to justice, the assault survivors now have the closure of knowing the perpetrator's identity and that he will never harm another living soul. Cobb County District Attorney Joyette Holmes reassured the police that justice is always a priority, stating, "Even if it takes 20 years, we refuse to give up." Number 10. Bad Teacher. A high school teacher in Florida was arrested in February 2018 after getting into a fight at a baseball game. Perhaps the most shocking part about this story is that the woman wasn't in an argument over which team was better, or even anything to do with the game she was watching. Instead, she got angry with another mom attending the baseball practice because her shorts were too short. Clearly, this teacher does not like short shorts. Her name is Terry Lee Coursey, 37 years old. Terry was suspended from her position at Clay High in Green Cove Springs after her arrest. According to the victim, Terry started the confrontation by criticizing her choice of clothing, or rather lack of. What could have been resolved with words then spiraled out of control and escalated to violence. Terry launched herself at the victim and punched her in the face. Terry was so upset that this woman would show her legs at a baseball game that she bludgeoned her face with her fists like a disgruntled animal. We're sure we can all appreciate the irony in that. But it was a real shame for the victim. She was bruised, cut, and wounded at a sports match for no good reason. Terry's insane outbursts had her lose her job and end up in the back of a police car. Oh yeah, and she was publicly shamed. Number 9. Brawling at the Steelers game. Almost everyone has seen the viral video of two people being beaten up by one man with a heavy fist at a Steelers game in the summer of 2021. This has got to be the most watched video of a fight at a football match in recent memory. If you've ever wondered what happened to those people in the video, you're in for a treat. First, let's describe what happened for those who don't know. The clip is short, but shows a woman who seems to be drunk getting belligerent with a man seated in front of her. He remains calm while the woman screams in his face. At least he's calm until she slaps him across the mouth. He cocks his fist back in defense. Another man jumps into the picture and tries to hit him, and that's when he lets his fists fly. He beats the woman back and the other man too, and then walks away as calmly as he possibly could. Clearly, this is not somebody you want to be fighting. According to the Pittsburgh Police Department, they managed to track the woman down and issue her a citation for disorderly conduct. Even though she already paid for her belligerence with a punch to the face, she'll now literally have to pay money to the government for it. Number 8. The Hillsborough Stadium disaster. On April 5, 1989, one of the worst disasters in sports history unfolded at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield, England. It was the semi-final match between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest. Just before kickoff, in an attempt to settle down the crazed sports fans who were overcrowding the turnstiles, the police match commander ordered exit gate C to open up. There were too many people outside, and so the commander let them flow into the stadium. What happened next was terrible. An influx of Liverpool fans rushed into the pens, resulting in massive congestion, panic, and horrible chaos. People were crushed against steel fencing, trampled, and torn apart as if they were in a drunken mosh pit. In the chaos, 700 people were injured and 96 Liverpool fans died. They were trampled over because there wasn't enough room inside the pen. It was absolute pandemonium and the biggest death toll in British sporting history. People were literally shoved against the mesh fencing at the front of the pen with such unbelievable force that they were killed. Imagine someone pushing you against the fence so hard that you died. It's horrible, but that's what happened. Nobody was spared, with the victims being identified as between 10 and 67 years old. 37 teenagers tragically lost their lives during this upsetting incident. One thing that did come of this was reform. Standing sections at stadiums were taken out and replaced by seating areas. The fences around the field were removed, and other general safety rules were put into effect. It doesn't take away the loss of life, but at least this kind of thing is less likely to ever happen again. Number 7. Violence in Sweden. As you may already know, sports violence is not specifically American. It happens everywhere, even somewhere as peaceful as Sweden. In 2014, on March 30th, a middle-aged man was assaulted near Helsingborg's Olympia Stadium. It was the first day of the new season, about 2:30 in the afternoon. The victim was a fan of Stockholm's Djurgården. The victim got into an argument with fans of the opposing team before the game even started. The fans of Helsingborg clubbed him over the head with an object and then left him in the street to die. The victim was found, taken to the hospital, and died shortly after. The game was then stopped after just 41 minutes, with the score tied 1-1. It created quite the uproar and devastated the community. What's really bizarre is that Sweden, although one of the countries with the lowest crime rates in the world, has one of the highest rates of sports violence. Usually, it's just brawling in the street. This was the first fatal episode of fan violence since 2002, when a different man was beaten to death in Stockholm. What's the worst incident of fan football violence that you've ever seen? Let us know about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe before the end of the video. Number 6. Mob brutality. A Brazilian mob killed a referee in one of the most brutal sports-related slayings of all time. It happened on June 30th, 2013. It was an amateur game in the Brazilian state of Maranhão. Referee Octavio da Silva flashed a red card and tried to kick one of the players out of the game. The player was Josenir dos Santos. He didn't think the referee was being fair and didn't want to get off the field. This resulted in a shouting match between the two. In most games, the shouting would have gone on until the player grudgingly left. But the referee took it to a whole new level of violence. He pulled out a knife and stabbed Josenir dos Santos right there on the field, in front of the spectators. You can probably imagine the pandemonium that erupted after. Just think if a referee stabbed your favorite player in the middle of a match. The fans would go crazy. And that's exactly what happened in Brazil. It was mob mentality at its absolute worst. Fans flooded down from the stands and onto the field, throwing stones and screaming. They cornered the referee, beat him to death, and then pulled his head off his body. It was utter barbarism, like something you might expect to see in the Colosseum in ancient Rome. The angry mob then took his severed head, plunged it onto a stake, and shoved that stake in the middle of the field, like a barbarian flag. At the end of the day, obviously none of this should have happened. The referee should never have stabbed the player, and the fans should never have decapitated him. It was the epitome of rampaging sports fans gone terribly, terribly wrong. Number 5. An accidental tumble. In 2016, after an exciting football game between the Denver Broncos and the Houston Texans, a man leaving Denver's Mile High Stadium died. It had nothing to do with fan violence. Instead, he tumbled off the stadium's north side and plummeted 50 feet to the ground. According to the Associated Press, he was discovered near Gate 5 just before 10 o'clock at night, then pronounced dead upon his arrival at the Denver Health Medical Center. How could such a devastating tragedy have occurred? Stadium management said that he fell over a stairwell, completely by accident. And while this may shock you, this was not the only tragic falling death at a sports game. In 2013, a fan fell off an escalator at a preseason game at the same stadium. Then in 2015, another fan fell between the concrete stairwell landings while trying to catch a hat. Clearly, Denver Stadium needs some better guardrails. It's also not only in Denver. On August 12, 2013, a fan died at Turner Field after falling 85 feet. In 2008, a man died in Atlanta during a game against the Mets by falling down a stairwell. There are so many falling deaths that happen in sports games in the US, it would take me all day to keep listing them. Number 4. Riot in Egypt. There have been some pretty brutal sports riots over the years, but nothing quite as violent as what happened in Egypt in 2015. A riot broke out at a major soccer game, resulting in a fight between the police and the fans, with over 25 people losing their lives. This wasn't the first time such violence broke out in Egypt either. The country is notorious for revolting after sports games. In 2012, yet another riot broke out that saw 74 people dead. The brutal fighting in 2012 involved fans from two rival teams, the Al Masry and the Al Ahly soccer clubs. They rushed towards one another on the field with rocks, knives, and even swords. According to CNN, 11 fans were sentenced to death for their involvement in inciting the deadly riot. The more recent riot in 2015 was less deadly, but no less horrifying. It started just before a match between the Egyptian Premier League clubs, ENPPI and Zamalek, at the Air Defense Stadium just outside Cairo. Security officials said it began when Zamalek fans rushed into the stadium without buying tickets. There was a flood of insane fans pouring into the entrance and rushing through the stadium. The Zamalek fans were met by fans of the opposing team. It turned into a mob-on-mob battle and even spread outside the stadium. Roads were blocked, buses were lit on fire, people were shooting at police cars. It was absolute insanity. The fighting didn't end until riot police showed up and finally dispersed everyone with tear gas. Number 3. Extreme lengths. Kevin Clayton was a major fan of the University of Arizona Wildcats, the men's basketball team. He never missed a game, no matter what. In December of 2017, Kevin had a business trip which would take him to Wisconsin. Once he settled down in his hotel room, he went out looking for a sports bar that was showing the Wildcats match. But he was in Wisconsin, and he couldn't find it being played anywhere. The very last restaurant he checked was Buffalo Phil's. When they said they didn't have the game on, Kevin was furious. He allegedly snuck his way into the manager's office of the restaurant, then used the phone to call the TV provider. He impersonated an employee and had the provider add the Pac-12 network so that he could watch the game. But it didn't take just one call. Kevin made 11 different phone calls to the TV provider until he was finally able to get the channels put on the restaurant's TV. He thought he was so clever that he would never get caught. He watched his game and was very happy with himself. What Kevin didn't count on was a very angry restaurant manager. When the manager realized he was paying more than he should have been for his TV, he started investigating. He learned what had happened. He called the police, and the detectives tracked Kevin down to the car dealership where he worked in Illinois. He was booked on identity theft for financial gain and is now looking at 12 years in prison, all just so he could watch a basketball game. Number 2. The Bottle Thrower. A Celtics fan threw a water bottle at Brooklyn Nets player Kyrie Irving. This happened in May of 2021 and saw the fan get in some serious trouble. Keep in mind, he only threw a water bottle, yet he was charged with assault and battery using a deadly weapon. The suspect was identified by the Boston police as Cole Buckley of Massachusetts. He was subjected to a lifetime ban from the TD Garden and could even be looking at jail time. The incident went down during the first round of the NBA playoffs. As the Nets were walking off the floor after being beaten by Brooklyn, Cole walked over to the tunnel and hefted his water bottle down at them as hard as he could. He didn't actually hit anybody, but was escorted out of the building and arrested anyway. It was the fourth time that same week that fans at NBA games threw something at the players. Apparently, tossing things at basketball players is a major problem in America. Number 1. Barroom Brawl. In November of 2018, an Alabama football fan was fatally beaten while out celebrating at a Tangipahoa parish bar. According to the local police, the officers were called to the bar very early on a Sunday morning in response to a brutal fight. Once there, they discovered 46-year-old Robert Bowers seriously injured. He had been mercilessly assaulted by 2 men. Firefighters provided medical attention until the ambulance arrived, and then Robert was taken to the North Oaks Medical Center. By Tuesday, he had passed away. Family and friends say that Robert, a resident of Louisiana, was a die-hard fan of the Crimson Tide. He had gone out to watch the Bama vs. LSU game on Saturday night. Then, in celebration, he went to the bar. That was when he got into an argument with the 2 men over the results of the game. It's believed that Robert's love for the Crimson Tide rubbed these fellows the wrong way. A man named Ryan Anthony blindsided him with a cheap shot, and then Asia Crockett got in on the beating. Both men stomped on Robert while he was helpless on the floor. It was terrible and tragic, and something that should have never happened. Just because Ryan liked a different team than these 2 guys, they felt compelled to beat him to death. They were both booked in charges of felony manslaughter and can now contemplate what they've done behind bars. Number 8. Patricia Ebel. A bikini-clad grandma named Patricia Ebel found herself in some hot water back in 2015 when she rear-ended a Ford Mustang with her BMW. She was driving her 10-year-old grandson home from a day at the pool in Naples, Florida, when the crash occurred. A local news crew captured the strange scene on camera as Collier County Sheriff's deputies administered a sobriety test to the barely clothed woman. She smelled strongly of alcohol, according to the arrest report, and allegedly she completely bombed the sobriety test. Police accused Ebel of having a blood alcohol content of more than twice the legal limit and charged her with driving under the influence. When a reporter asked the grandmother if she knew why she was being taken into custody, she said no. A judge sentenced Ebel to probation and banned her from drinking alcohol for a year. Apparently, the message didn't sink in though, because she was busted again for drinking in 2016. This time her blood alcohol content tested at more than twice the legal limit during a visit to a probation officer. Oh, Granny. Ebel managed to sort out her legal issues, and in 2017, she opened up to Inside Edition about her scandalous run-ins with the law. She said that several people offered to buy the bikini she was wearing when she got her DUI, but that she held on to the two-piece. Patricia also admitted that she still drives around in a bikini, but that she wears a cover-up now, which perhaps isn't as crazy as it sounds, considering she lives in Florida. Number 7. Michael Swanson. Police in Midwest City, Oklahoma received an alarming call last year from a local resident named Jackie Roller, who said that a 13-year-old grandson, Chris, had been shot by a 69-year-old relative named Michael Swanson. Some news articles identify the suspect as the boy's grandfather, but it's unclear whether that was the case. Needless to say, it's safe to assume that the elder gentleman was a grandfather-like figure to the teen, until he decided to shoot him. Officers rushed to the scene, where they were met with Swanson's threats to either kill himself or force the police to kill him because he refused to go back to prison. The suspect initially held the victims hostage, but he eventually let them go. The standoff between Swanson and law enforcement lasted for hours. Police deployed tear gas and summoned a SWAT team, and finally managed to get the distressed elderly man out of the house. Christopher, the teen who was shot in the ordeal, said that Swanson fired a bullet at him after the two got into an argument. When his grandmother Jackie arrived home, Swanson reportedly told her that she might want to go check on the boy and admitted to shooting him. He also told Jackie that he wasn't done shooting Chris and that he planned to do it again, this time in front of her. He then allegedly said that he was going to kill the entire family. The boy's aunt, Christina Slemmer, told local station KFOR that Swanson had started acting strange after moving in with the family, and that they suspected him of using drugs. He was charged with shooting with intent to kill and for being a felon in possession of a firearm. Number 6. Christopher Allen. Recent news reports out of Greensburg, Indiana detail the shocking accusations against 48-year-old grandfather Christopher D. Allen, who is facing an attempted murder charge for allegedly attacking his 5-month-old granddaughter. Little Briley Adams wound up in the hospital with catastrophic injuries. At last update, her condition was improving, but she was still fighting for her life. Briley's family told police that Christopher attacked her out of nowhere one afternoon in March, and that he hit the baby in the face multiple times, to the point where she turned blue and needed CPR. Loved ones were left baffled that someone could do that to a helpless child, let alone their own granddaughter. Fraternal grandmother Jennifer Powers told local station Fox 59 that she was struggling to process how or why the unfathomable ordeal happened. She further explained that she didn't even remember the ride to the hospital because she was in complete shock. The baby is expected to survive, but will be in a neck collar for several months as she endures a lengthy road to recovery from a fractured eye socket, a fractured skull, and serious neck injuries. Briley also suffered from a brain bleed and was hooked up to a feeding tube because she was unable to swallow when she arrived at the hospital. Her mother, Madeline Hadley, was heartbroken but hopeful in a news interview, during which she said the little girl is a fighter and that she is even smiling and playing with her toys, despite all she's been through. Hadley hopes to learn what caused her father to act so out of character. Allen is currently being held on a $10 million bail. His trial is scheduled to begin June 7th. Number 5. Chuck Moser. Late last year, a 70-year-old grandfather from Virginia named Charles Chuck Moser was arrested for allegedly jumping off skyscrapers with a parachute. Someone had captured the incident on camera and reported it to the police. A subsequent investigation led them to Moser, who they have accused of trespassing onto private property in Fairfax County for the sake of jumping off a building that was under construction. Detectives also connected the suspect with 2 similar incidents that took place in 2020. Moser adamantly denied the allegations in an interview with Fox 5 DC. The military veteran, avid runner, home improvement contractor and grandfather of 6, told the station that he's simply the fall guy for crimes that detectives have failed to identify the real culprit behind. The act of base jumping is not illegal in the area, but for safety reasons, it's definitely not recommended. Police have investigated numerous base jumping incidents in recent years, based on the fact that the jumper trespassed onto private property to carry out their daring deed. Moser was a suspect in at least 6 incidents, but he was never charged in several cases due to a lack of evidence, and most of them exceed the statute of limitations at this point. In other words, it's too late to slap Moser with additional charges for incidents that happened a long time ago, whether he's guilty or not. The suspect is all too aware of how far back the allegations and police probes against him go, but he made sure to point out that there was a lack of proof behind the suspicions, including any fingerprints at the crime scene or footage revealing his actual face. Moser himself agrees that the area where the most recent incident occurred isn't very safe for base jumping. He faces 3 misdemeanor trespassing charges. His court date was set for February 12th, but we were unable to find any news updates on how the case played out. Number 4. Charlotte Simpson. In 2019, when a green minivan failed to pull over for flashing lights in London, Kentucky, police weren't just going to go away. They followed the vehicle until it pulled into a driveway and proceeded to question its occupants, 32-year-old Rebecca Jean Fultz and her 69-year-old mother, Charlotte Simpson. Officers originally planned to pull the minivan over for a simple traffic stop, but they soon realized that both women were wanted on outstanding bench warrants. Things took an even uglier turn when Rebecca refused to exit the vehicle, at which point Charlotte declared that there was a baby in the van. But the child safety seat was empty, and there were no signs of an infant at first glance. After rifling through the garbage-strewn, insect-infested vehicle filled with bags of trash and feces-covered clothing, the police found a 16-day-old baby boy on the floor between the 2 front seats. He was covered in ants, dehydrated, had a dirty diaper, and was struggling to breathe, according to the Laurel County Sheriff's Office. The agency also pointed out that the van had no air conditioning and the situation was dire. A deputy drove the ambulance to the hospital so that the paramedics could tend to the ailing child. Police arrested Fultz and Simpson on several charges, including first-degree criminal child abuse. In a jailhouse interview with local station WKYT, Fultz claimed that the police exaggerated the severity of her son's condition. She insisted that he had just a few heat bumps and that she wasn't a bad mother, but she declined to explain why the baby wasn't in his car seat. Simpson told the interviewers that Rebecca was a good mother, but also failed to explain the little boy's obviously unacceptable condition. Number 3. Linda Kennison. A 58-year-old grandmother from Connecticut named Linda Kennison made headlines on Thanksgiving this year when she was arrested in connection with the death of her 6-week-old grandson. Just days earlier, her daughter Crystal Krasowski had dialed 911 and reported that her baby was pale and that there was stuff coming out of his nose and that he was breathing lightly. He was rushed to the hospital, where he died a few days later. A post-mortem examination found no clear signs of abuse, according to the state police. Kennison told investigators that she and Crystal had found the baby in his distressed state after placing him in a bassinet. But the women's stories didn't add up, so detectives pushed harder for information, hoping one of them would crack. Crystal allegedly admitted that she had smothered the boy for 20 minutes until he stopped moving because she was stressed out about life. She already had one child to take care of and didn't feel like she could handle another. When her son became still, she reportedly put him in a swing and simply carried on with her day. Kennison, who was at the home that day, admitted that she knew the baby wasn't breathing, but claimed that she had no idea Crystal had hurt him. They tried putting food in the child's mouth to make it look like he was alive and well, but it didn't work. When the deranged mother-daughter duo finally decided to call 911, Kennison allegedly told Crystal to lie to the police to avoid losing custody of her other child. During the call, she followed her mother's advice and claimed that the baby was breathing lightly. But this clearly wasn't the case, according to prosecutors. Police charged Crystal with first-degree manslaughter. Kennison was charged with risking injury to a child. Number 2. Drinking on an empty stomach. Police in Broadview Heights, Ohio, recently responded to a call about a car accident involving one vehicle on Interstate 77. The person who called 911 described seeing the car smashed against the guardrail with the driver slumped over the steering wheel. Officers arrived on the scene to find it as the caller described. The crash involved a silver Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates, a heavily damaged front end, and a missing front tire. According to police, the woman behind the wheel smelled strongly of booze and wasn't wearing a seatbelt. She reportedly complained that her wrist hurt and that she was on her way to her son's home to visit her granddaughter. The driver claimed that the vehicle hit a patch of ice while she was taking a quick second to look at her phone, at which point she lost control of the car. An officer noticed a wet spot on her pants while walking her to an ambulance, indicating that she may have urinated on herself. A search of the woman's car turned up several empty single-shot bottles of Fireball whiskey. She allegedly admitted to drinking the alcohol and taking oxycodone on an empty stomach earlier in the day. The grandma was taken in on a slew of charges, including driving drunk, not wearing a seatbelt, failure to control, and open container. Number 1. Grandpa I. In early March, police on the Philippine island of Catanduanes charged a 63-year-old grandfather with nearly 1,500 counts of rape. A law enforcement spokesperson identified the suspect only by his alias, I. The arrest came after a regional judge issued a warrant for the man's arrest for 1,050 counts of statutory rape and 437 counts of rape. He was the region's most wanted suspect at the time he was charged, and he is accused of repeatedly victimizing 2 young relatives over a 5-year period. These are some extremely serious allegations, which is why there was no recommended bail in this disturbing case. The survivors are now in a safe and secure place, and the suspect remains behind bars while he waits to be brought to justice for his alleged heinous actions. No maximum possible sentence has been announced, but in the Philippines, any rape charge can carry a life sentence. Speaking with Vice News, police spokesperson Emsol Ikawat described the case as shocking. The arrest came shortly after the Philippine president signed a bill raising the legal age of consent from 12 to 16. Activists hope that the milestone legislation will help authorities tackle the ongoing problem of sexual abuse against children in the country, where 7 out of every 10 rape survivors are minors. Thanks for watching. Would you rather receive a phone call from your 80-year-old grandmother asking for bail money or have to survive an entire month on nothing but prison food? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!